Well, joining us now to break down more of this week's Democrat National Convention is former White House Press Secretary Sean Spicer. Sean, welcome to the program. And, call me old-fashioned. I'd like to see a bit of policy at these things, but this convention continues to be pretty much a policy-free zone. There aren't even any policies on the Harris website. But the ones we've heard about, like hiking the capital gains tax, taxing unrealized capital gains, things like that, are spooking a lot of people. Sean, how can the Kamala Harris people claim on the one side that she's going to fix the economy on day one without telling us how, while also setting to double down on everything that created some of the economic disasters we've had for the past 3.5 years?
That's absolutely right. I mean, she's literally the arsonist trying to tell you how she's going to put out the fire and wants credit for it. I mean, the reality is she talks about day one. She was in the White House. Her office is right down from the president's. They talk about being a partnership and a team, and yet she's acting as though she hasn't been there for the 3.5 years that have created these policies. But, it's amazing. It's the website. It's the convention. It's her speeches. It's her lack of interaction. I did my first campaign in the U.S. in 1994, 30 years ago. Now, hopefully I don't look like I did that, but that's just the reality. And I've never seen anything like this in my political career. The idea that you can get away with not talking about what you'll do is absolutely amazing to me. And it's funny because Trump the other day put out some policy. I can't remember what it was, and the immediate press reaction was it lacks, certain amount of detail. And I was like, at least he's talking about policy. Like, you can't get anything out of her. He has a section of his website that literally lists all the things that he'll do. He constantly is talking about different policy proposals and, and solutions that he has to get the country back. And she has nothing.
Well, Sean, it strikes me, though, that the problem the Democrats have is that they're caught in kind of a double bind. The things that their base voters care about are things that are really unpopular with everybody else. Like, we've barely heard about climate change, which you'd think would be a big issue. And I reckon, what do you think? Is this because, they're caught between the Republican voters' desire and mainstream voters' desire for jobs and low energy prices and what the left wants and what their left flank is demanding, which is to cut fossil fuels and carbon emissions?
Yeah, you're explaining the dynamic absolutely right. But here's the thing. The political dynamic is this. Normally, as you know, you'd go through a primary where you'd have to appeal to those voters in the base voters that you referred to. And in doing so, you would have tacked to the left. You would have had to talk about climate change and all the other kind of leftist, crazy, progressive stuff, government intervention, higher taxes, more government spending. But because she pushed Joe Biden out, she didn't have to go through that process. So they've kind of avoided that scrutiny, that appeal to the base. And they right now, I think their goal is to be everything to everyone, right? So let's not talk about policy. If you're from Pennsylvania and you support fracking because it's important for energy and jobs in Pennsylvania, well, I'm for fracking. If you're against it, well, don't worry, I can be against that too. She is on both sides of every single issue. She has flip-flopped on stuff. She's absolutely the phoniest person I've ever seen in politics. She will say and do whatever she has to do. It's funny. She wants to be able to say that she's tough on crime, and then she wants to be able to get anyone who has protested or committed vandalism or violence during the protests out by supporting the Minnesota Freedom Fund. She wants it both ways on every policy. I get it. As somebody who's run campaigns, I'd kill for this. The idea that you are not held accountable and you can say whatever you want, and in some cases, nothing at all, is almost the dream of every political operative. You would say to yourself, there's no way they'll let me get away with this, though.
Well, it's interesting, Sean, because one of the things that I've seen through the campaign is lots of talk about empathy and kindness and things like that. And Trump has now finally, I think, started to latch on to a way to talk about policy while also hitting some of those themes. Have a look at what he was talking about. He went to the border earlier today and talked very tough on immigration, and he brought out some of the human stories of victims of crimes committed by illegal immigrants. Have a listen to this woman whose skull was fractured in a robbery committed by an illegal in San Francisco.
The police were great. They had caught him and his accomplice in a really short time, because I remember being on a gurney in the hallway of the hospital and I had to ID them. They were laughing as they fractured my skull. What was really the worst part about it all, though, is when I found out that taxpayer money was paying for job training for this guy who avoided going to prison for the first felony he committed for jobs he couldn't legally hold.
I mean, that's really powerful stuff there. Is this, do you think, a winning strategy for the Trump campaign to get back onto some of these policies, but also talk about the human cost and maybe show actual empathy for actual Americans?
Yeah. There's two things here. Number one, as an issue, immigration to me is the most powerful thing. You hear the human stories like you just heard, and it wasn't Donald Trump, right? Here's this victim talking about the impact of the open borders policies that the Harris administration has supported and allowed to occur. And there's no question about it with her role. She can deny it all she wants, but that was her portfolio. And they can't run from that. So I think that, look, the thing about immigration is it covers safety, right? Personal safety, as you just saw with that woman's unbelievable testimony. We talk about drug cartels and trafficking and terrorism coming in through the border. We talk about the fentanyl coming in. In so many ways, it gives us an opening to talk about the impact of an open border policy in so many different ways. Maybe you're a security person. Maybe you care about the economic impact of jobs being taken away. Maybe you care about the drugs flowing into the community. No matter what it is, all of that stems from an open borders immigration policy that this administration has. So I am a huge fan of it. I think that this is a smart line of attack. The second thing that I would say is you saw in that clip right there, right? It's a human story. It's not Donald Trump levying the attack. It's somebody else. And I think that's a smart tactic. The other tactic that they're using on this and several other issues is Kamala Harris's own words. They're using videos of her talking about her policy, why she's doing something. And that, to me, is the most powerful thing. You can't say that Donald Trump's attacking her when it's her saying it. And so I think that they have really hit their stride this week and done a really good job. I handled the counter-programming for the last two major presidential cycles, 12 and 16. And I think that they have hit their stride, and it's been excellent this week, the counter-programming that J.D. Vance and Donald Trump and his team have done to juxtapose what they will do versus Kamala Harris while she had her convention. And, you know, for those people who don't necessarily know, back in the day, meaning just a couple cycles ago, you would allow the other team to just sort of have their convention and have at it. Donald Trump and J.D. Vance have done an unbelievably effective bracketing operation to make sure that she doesn't get all the oxygen to herself for these 4 or 5 days.
Sean Spicer, we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you so much for your time this evening.